Good evening. Welcome to a forum for Palo Alto City Council candidates. My name is Sid Espinoza, former mayor of Palo Alto and tonight's moderator. While I usually don't speak from a script, there's a bunch to cover at the beginning here, so indulge me if you will. I want to thank PAN for organizing this important conversation. It's critical that we hear from and learn about our candidates for public office, and I applaud PAN for creating a forum where those views can be shared. Here's our format for tonight. First, each candidate will be given 1 minute to provide an opening statement. We have timekeepers who will inform them when 15 seconds remains, and a bell will ring when their minute is up. Throughout the evening, the candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. And while we realize that 1 minute is very short and we'll be discussing complex issues, we have many candidates and we want to be sure that we have a chance to hear from everyone. So candidates, when you hear the bell, please complete your sentence and stop talking so that I'm not forced to cut you off, because I will cut you off. Thank you. After opening statements, we will have a series of questions that have been prepared by PAN. 4 to 6 candidates will answer each question before we move to the next one. So not every person will be answering every question. PAN's leadership has sought to create questions and a discussion around issues of importance to citizens across all of Palo Alto's neighborhoods. To be clear, I have not written or edited any of these questions, nor have I assigned the questions to particular candidates. I am simply the moderator. And to the best of my knowledge, none of the candidates are aware of any of the questions. After an hour of these prepared questions, we will transition to questions from you, the audience. To be clear, there will be no direct questions from the floor. All audience questions will be submitted via cards on your seats. After the audience questions, each candidate will be given 1 minute for a closing remark. The event will end promptly at 9 p.m. And finally, and this is critically important, we want every candidate to feel comfortable expressing their views and speaking frankly. To this end, please refrain from applauding, booing, or expressing any other reaction to the candidate's statements. There is a similar policy in council chambers during council meetings. Again, no applauding, booing, etc. Thank you. Now, let's get started with opening statements. The order has been randomly selected, beginning with Nancy Shepard. Please.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. I want you to know that 5 years ago I ran for city council in 2009 because I was really afraid for Palo Alto's future. We had what I learned to be a big burn, a 50-foot rail coming through our city, going through our neighborhoods with a superstructure of a station down on University Avenue. Stanford Hospital agreement was stuck. The hospital was seismically unfit to last into our future. We had a lot of infrastructure problems, and we needed to get them resolved. Pensions had been supersized, teens were in stress, and we were in the middle of a difficult financial crisis. We've resolved all of that in 5 years. 5 years later, we are friends with Caltrain and we're modernizing it. I've been very instrumental in getting that to happen. Stanford Hospital is getting built. Infrastructure has a catch-up, a keep-up, and more. We are out of the financial crisis and we're moving forward.
Next, we will hear from C. Reddy.
Good evening. You know, it's Palo Alto we love. We all love this town. We want to continue to keep it as good as it is today. No different. We don't want to have too many people, too many buildings, too many things, too much traffic, as well as I would like integrity to be part of the council team. I think we've been asking people about that, and I would like it to be innovative. Innovative because we need to be innovative. Palo Alto became famous for David Packett's garage. We want to continue to encourage that. You know, we have Tim Cook now, Steve Jobs was here, and Mark is here. So we want to continue to do that. I came to Stanford in 1973, December, first year when I came to Texas Tech. And I always wanted to be here. It took me 41 years to come here. I would love to have your support so I can help make our dreams come true. Thank you.
Lydia Koo.
2 years ago, I would never have imagined myself here. So what happened? The Maybell project that became the Measure D referendum. I got into it in trying to help neighbors have a serious and legitimate to have their serious and legitimate concerns heard. And I got upset when their concerns were dismissed and ignored. The reason Measure D was defeated was that many of the same problems had occurred so often that many residents said no more. My experience as a leader of that effort led me here. As a leader of the citywide emergency preparedness effort, I worked with City Hall, other civic organizations, and residents in neighborhoods across the city. We need to manage growth. We need to track cumulative impacts. We need a balanced approach to development. But my top priority is changing culture at City Hall to one that listens meaningfully to residents. Without this, it's a game of whack-a-mole, trying to fix bad proposals on a case-by-case basis and simply too exhausting. Thank you.
Tom Du Bois.
Thanks, Sid. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thanks for people watching at home. And I want to also thank Palo Alto Neighborhoods. Neighborhood associations are some of my favorite organizations. I'm a member of the Midtown Residents Association. I've lived in Midtown since 1995. My wife, Irina, and I have 2 kids in the schools. My son, Ryan's the senior at Gunn. My daughter's at JLS Middle School. My background, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been a CEO of a data analytics company. And this is a critical election. This next council is going to complete our comprehensive plan, which sets a vision for the city for the next 10 to 15 years. 5 years ago, Nancy was worried about the future of the city. I'm worried about the future of the city now, and that's why I'm running. I really want to fight for the soul of our city, protect our quality of life. So we're going to talk about issues tonight. I have a wide range of issues I'm concerned about. Land use is number one. I've been involved in the community. I'm passionate about Palo Alto. I'm eager to go to work for the city. Thank you.
Corey Walbach.
Hi, good evening. My name is Corey Wolbach, and I'm a Palo Alto native, a graduate of Gunn High School and UC San Diego. I have private sector management experience, and I've been an activist for issues such as campaign finance reform, better governance of our universities, the public ones here in California, and also for the environment. I work for the state senate. In that capacity, I've had a chance to liaise with Palo Alto, work with the city council, staff, departments, community groups, and also some of our neighboring towns, as well as the school district. I know how to work with the system. I also know how to stand up to it. I will bring my experience, my relationships, my insight, and my hometown perspective to bear as we go through a few priorities over the next couple of years. Reforming our planning process to focus on community input, to focus on homes, retail, transit, and parks, improve our transportation infrastructure, and elevate Palo Alto's leadership in the region, especially for issues like airport noise, flooding, especially around sea level rise. Thank you.
Wayne Douglas.
Corey is a hard act to follow. What a fine young man. My issue, everyone, or anybody who cares about my candidacy will know, is the homeless. It's what got me, I said one time, out of the house. I was not pleased by the discussion in city council while they were debating, if that was the word, the ordinance for Cubberley. They solved the problem actually by imposing a deadline for people to stay there, which in effect cleared out the squatters, if that's the word you want. And the odd thing about it is they could have always done that. Instead, they passed this draconian ordinance that they never enforced because it was found to be unconstitutional in the South. It's going to come back. People have died last year.
I'll have to cut you off there. John Frederick.
I'd like to pick up where I left off.
You need to turn on your mic, please. You need to push, there you go.
Oh, okay. I'd like to pick up where I left off at the league meeting the other night. And by reading this quote from the Declaration of Independence on how to secure the rights of liberty, equality, and life itself. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
A.C. Johnston.
I'm A.C. Johnston. I'm a resident of downtown South. Nice to see all of you here tonight. I'm a lawyer. I've spent nearly 40 years helping people resolve complicated and contentious disputes. I want to talk about three priorities tonight: the comprehensive plan, our infrastructure, and transparency in government. The comprehensive plan is our blueprint for the city's future, and it's strongest if everybody participates in preparing it. And there's still time for you to get your voice heard. Our public safety buildings need to be replaced. They're not safe. We want to make sure that our police and firefighters are safe themselves so that they can come and help us in an earthquake. You're entitled to a transparent government. You're entitled to know what's going on. You're entitled to be able to hold city officials to the highest responsibilities. We want to make a Palo Alto that we're all proud of, a Palo Alto that, thank you.
Greg Scharf.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'm Greg Scharf. I was mayor of Palo Alto in 2013, and I got to say, I'm proud of our record. Every vote I took was a vote with the intention of increasing the livability of Palo Alto and making sure that our neighborhoods, our schools, and our community is a fabulous place to live. To that end, I focused on fiscal responsibility. If you remember, we had the Great Recession. I think we did a great job on that. Focused on infrastructure. We have an infrastructure funding plan that I think is superb. Also, I focused on traffic and parking. We've spent lots and lots of time focusing on these issues and working on them. We eliminated parking exceptions, make sure that every new project is fully parked. I wrote a colleague's memo to pull developments off the sidewalk, another colleague's memo to protect retail, protected city services during their session, put in % for art, ban smoking in our parks, and I would ask that you please support me in November.
Eric Filseth.
This on? So first of all, thank you all very much for coming and for caring about this. My name is Eric Filseth, and I'm running because I'm concerned that a disconnect has arisen between City Hall and the values and priorities of residents, particularly around land use and its impact on the community in terms of traffic, congestion, parking, impact on city services, school enrollment, and so forth. I'm concerned that over the next 4 years, we're going to make decisions that determine what Palo Alto is going to look like for many decades to come, and it's crucial that City Hall and the residents be back in alignment in order for that to happen. I'm a tech guy. I spent 27 years in the semiconductor industry, including 16 years at Cadence Design Systems, where I was a corporate vice president, and 5 years as CEO of Sierra Nova, a chip design software company. My wife and I have lived for 23 years in Palo Alto's downtown north neighborhood. Our 2 boys went through the entire Palo Alto school system. And the last couple of years, I've been involved in the downtown parking project. I worked on the Maybell campaign, and I am a member of Palo Altans for Sensible Zoning. Thanks.
Mark Weiss.
In 1769, a man named Portola, on behalf of the King of Spain, set forth from San Diego with 50 men and 50 mules or horses, and they were looking for something they only saw from the sea. They were looking for Monterey Bay. And after about 2 weeks, they admitted they didn't know where they were, and they looked up. They were actually about right where I'm sitting, maybe where Karen was sitting. They looked up and they saw a big tree, or perhaps 2 big trees, and they said, El Palo Alto. And they marked it, and they went home. And I was thinking about that today because I had a client meeting up in South City, Bartolucci's restaurant, and as I was coming home all the way down El Camino, just sort of figuring out, you know, where our community ends and our neighbors' community start, a song came on the radio. It takes a lot of love to get us through the night. Nicolette Larson, 5 o'clock at 103.7. And I think that does apply to our current situation. I think you should think carefully about how you cast your 5 ballots.
Karen Holman.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Pan for putting on this forum. From my perspective, this campaign is not, an election is not about the candidates, it's not about me, it's about you. It's about you and the kind of town you want, it's the kind of values that you want represented. It's about open space, it's about housing, it's about diversity. It's about your right to be heard and your right to be considered. These are the things that matter. 13 years of experience I bring to this campaign. I've served on the City Council, Planning and Transportation Commission, SOFA working group for the area plan in that area where the clinic moved out here in this area. And in that time, I've demonstrated my commitment to public service, to public engagement, to responsible government, and to my preservation and conservation issues having to do with the environment. And that's all demonstrated by my voting record. And I really appreciate your attending tonight.
Thank you to all the candidates for their opening statements. I can't tell you how many times on the dais at minute 25 that someone was speaking, I had hoped that we only had 1 minute per speaker, and I thank you all for keeping to that. I just want a housekeeping and apologies for people watching on television. There are so many people that have come in now. If people could scoot towards the middle of each section that you're in so that on the sides there are open spaces so that we can get people who are standing in the back a seat to come down and they can see those, that would be greatly appreciated. We are now going to transition to prepared questions, the first section of which relate to the quality of life here in Palo Alto. The first question is related to retail. How would you support the retail sector? Specifically, how would you protect, support, and possibly even extend ground floor retail in our commercial and neighborhood commercial areas? Again, we'll have 1 minute for each response, beginning with Karen Holman.
Love it. This is one of my passions and absolutely one of the things that I have spoken about numerous times as a planning commissioner, as a council member. I think the ground floor retail areas downtown need to be expanded. I oppose their being shrunk. In 2009, when this came to the Planning Commission, I was part of a colleague's memo to expand ground floor retail in the downtown area, and we got just 1 block expansion of that, which was the block on Emerson between Forest and Homer. We'd already lost two ground floor retail businesses, 2 office. California Avenue, there is a petition going around in that area to preserve and protect that area for local independent businesses and limit the chain stores. And I support that effort and will be working towards that end.
Corey Wolbach.
Community serving retail is critical to our quality of life, our community character, and when situated close to homes, reducing traffic. Making sure that as we go forward, as we finalize our comprehensive plan, as we approve our housing element, thank you to those who just have put so much work into it so far, as we approve that, we need to make sure that we situate our housing close to retail, and we can also put restrictions, simple restrictions on chains moving into Palo Alto. That's something we should seriously explore. For instance, if a company has more than, say, 10 locations nationwide, we could prohibit them from adding a store in Palo Alto. That's within our legal power, as I understand, and that's the kind of thing we need to explore.
Greg Scharf.
Thank you. I also am very passionate about this issue. I actually wrote the colleagues' memo, and I was very pleased that Karen signed on with me on it. This is my most passionate issue. I think that we need to extend ground floor retail throughout the downtown. We need to get rid of uses like the Wells Fargo. That's an office building on University Avenue. We need to amortize those out of existence, basically, give them the legal right to leave. And we need to have retail that doesn't break the block, which means that retail goes on, and we don't have that. I'm also very supportive of everything Karen said in terms of California Avenue. I think as California Avenue changes, my office is there, and we very much want to protect what I would call the funky nature of California. In fact, you see these shirts that people say, keep Austin weird. Well, maybe we should try and keep California Avenue weird. So ground floor retail, and the other thing we need to do is watch fake retail. I was just walking on California Avenue, and I saw a sign that said office, retail, and I'm thinking to myself, where are they going to put the office? Are they going to put a little fake retail in front and some office in the back? Thank you.
Lydia Koo.
We need to safeguard retail, especially keeping the integrity of the locations of where retail is located. Retail stores are more than just the restaurants and coffee shops and boutiques. It's also about your hardware stores and nurseries and art stores. This is the places where you build relationship. It provides the opportunity for people to meet people and to create community. So limiting chain stores is one way of doing it, and encouraging more local flavor in terms of what kind of stores go in there. But more so, it's about building community. Thank you.
Wayne Douglas.
Well, we have had and we've lost recently a number of unique, almost individual businesses. I'm thinking of Cho in particular. My wife and I used to eat there, and then we became vegetarians, and we let it go, and then he went. Forced in a retirement, I guess, one of the excuses anyway. The only way I can see, I mean, we are in a capitalist society, and we have venues that are inappropriate for almost anything else except somebody like Joe. There are undersized lots all along Barron Park. You want to, in Camino Real, for example. Good luck again finding retail that'll go in there. But I do like the controlling chain stores in Palo Alto, even though I hang out a lot at Starbucks. That's the one avenue that makes a lot of sense to me.
Our next question is about growth. How much, where, and what kind of office space can Palo Alto sustain? How does this compromise quality of life of local residents, and what mitigations do you support? We will hear again from Corey Walbach.
Palo Altans, both in their residences and in their small local businesses, are getting priced out of Palo Alto. This is in significant part because of the jobs housing imbalance, the over-prioritization of office development at the expense of housing development and traffic or transportation infrastructure and retail space to keep up with it is destroying our community. It's squeezing people out. Just go around the community like I've been doing. I invite anyone to. Go knock on your neighbor's door and ask them, do you have somebody sleeping on your couch? Do you have somebody sleeping in an illegal in-law or granny unit? There's a lot that the city needs to expand, but right now, office development is not one of them. It should only be expanded after we've worked on getting our housing stock up a little bit and getting our transportation infrastructure up very significantly.
Tom Du Bois.
I think we need to end the era of exceptions. I don't see any reason to grant an exception for an office building in the current environment. We also need to enforce our zoning. I also like us to consider potentially replacing some of the mixed-use locations with an R&R zone, which would be retail on the bottom and residential, because currently office rents are pushing everything out. So even in our mixed-use locations, we're getting primarily office. I also think we really need to look at the outdated assumption of 250 square feet of office space per parking spot. It's just decades out of date. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Karen Holman.
Well, yes, I think we do need to curtail office development. We can roll it back, but I think one of the main things that we need to do is not continue the current trend that's having significant impacts on our community, having to do with traffic and parking impacts. It does also, with office development, does also increase our jobs housing imbalance. And no matter what we do, we're never going to be able to bring that into balance. These decisions were made decades ago. We don't need to exacerbate the problem, though. We do have a business registry that I was on a colleague's memo. Again, that's a council initiative. A colleague's memo to put in a business registry, and that will help to count office occupancy, building occupancy, parking demand, and transportation issues such as what zip code people are coming to work from. So we can help address some of those issues, but the way that we are addressing building of office space right now is not adequate to protect the community.
Eric Filseth.
Yeah, well, I think all of this is correct so far. I think we don't adequately account for the downstream impacts of large-scale office space conversion in our town. As far as I can tell, we need to think about, if we build this much office space here, we're going to need this much space, this much parking, this much space in our streets, this much city services, we're going to need this much housing to supply those jobs. That means we're going to need this much space in our schools, this much space for city parks and so forth. And we're not really looking at the big picture and how all that works together, right? In the last 4 years, we've opened more office space in the downtown university core than the previous 20 years combined. It's a huge issue, and the result is, as you see, right? We have the largest jobs housing ratio in the county and the worst inbound traffic commutes in the county because of that. So University Avenue is what it is. I think we really need to focus on some of the areas, other areas, the California Avenue and Midtown, to make sure that doesn't happen there, because the signs are actually starting there, and we need to address that through zoning and development reform.
Lydia Koo.
I think this question, actually, a lot of you as residents need to answer that, identifying whether it is office spaces that you want. What is it that you see that identifies Palo Alto? Is it the birthplace of business, these innovative companies, or is that what you want? So what it ultimately comes down to is, office space has a lot of cumulative impacts down the road, and what we need to do is to make sure that we're addressing that and not adding to the problem of what we have. It's become a crisis. It's way beyond tipping point, and parking and traffic issues are something that has come about due to office space and the amount of people that are inhabiting each of these space in open style kind of building. So I think that that's something that we need to kind of curtail moving forward. Thank you.
Greg Scharf.
So yes, I also agree we need to curtail office development. I think what we need to do is to, first of all, eliminate the PC process. I mean, I see no value in that when it comes to office. I think the community's lost faith in that, and I think we should eliminate it. I also think that we should decide how much office space we're going to have in a particular area, and then have some sort of a beauty contest, some sort of a cap where you say to yourself, we're going to choose this project, we're going to allow that to go forward because it has the least impact, it's fully parked, it has community benefits, it's close to transportation, it makes sense to have it there. Because we're not going to be able to say you can have no office development in Palo Alto. So I think we need to decide how we're going to get that and what we're going to do. And I would strongly support making sure that we mitigate all of the impacts through some sort of a beauty contest on that to make sure that our office development doesn't impact the city.
We will now move to the next question. Just in case audience members are wondering, there are multiple questions in each category, and it will even out. You'll see that all candidates get to answer questions evenly if you're wondering why. Again, they were randomly assigned by Pan. The next question relates to parking. Do you support an expanded residential parking permit program? How should it be structured to protect neighborhoods? What alternatives or additional mitigations do you support? We'll begin with Eric Filsef.
Yes, I do support a residential parking permit program. Excuse me. I think, the fundamental problem is that once you hit a certain number of commercial vehicles parked in a neighborhood, the neighborhood changes. When the neighborhood is full of cars with both sides of the street, with unbroken lines of cars down both sides, and other people circling around looking for a place to park, it's not a neighborhood anymore, it's a parking lot. And that's what we have to back off from. It's not a question of there's so many parking spaces and who gets them, the commuters or the residents. It's a question of capacity and the character of the neighborhood. So that's the first thing that has to be addressed. So I do support a residential parking permit program, right? I think the crucial question is how many permits do we issue? And I think we need to back off to the tipping point where the neighborhood becomes a neighborhood again and not a parking lot, and issue that many permits. It's not a question of driving out all the commercial vehicles. Thanks.
A.C. Johnston.
I also support a residential parking permit. I've lived in cities where they have them. They certainly work to ensure that only people with permits can can park on the streets. What I'm worried about here is whether the parking permit system is simply going to move the problem from the neighborhoods that have the permits to other neighborhoods. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of tweaking that's done once we put it into effect, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing to put it in, see how it works, and be prepared to adjust it. I think there are some other things we can do to improve our parking situation as well. I think that the staff has looked at technology solutions that would give people an opportunity to, either through their iPhone or somewhere else, see where there are spaces available. On an average day, even when people are having trouble finding places to park, it turns out that the top floor of the Cowper garage is usually free. So if you knew that, you could go and park there.
Tom Du Bois.
Yeah, I support the residential parking permit. I think it should roll out similar to the College Terrace model, where blocks can decide whether they want it or not. I know I've heard from some people who are fairly far away from downtown who don't feel like they want a permit immediately. And we do need to look at multiple fixes, including additional garages. But even fully parked buildings, are based on outdated assumptions. I mean, Stanford's currently using 80 to 100 square feet per person for office space. So when we say we have a building fully parked, it may be only 50% parked. And that just continues to contribute, so we're putting ourselves in a further hole. So we need to really fix those assumptions about how many people are going into these buildings.
John Frederick.
I believe this is a good example of the tin ear for matters political that the current council has exhibited, in that they haven't given relief already for the people on the north side of town and in the south of Forest area. I would have a rolling start to this program and have given a permit already, a placard to every homeowner, every tax-paying homeowner in those districts that are severely impacted already, and work from there into the data concerning electronic fixes downtown and things like that. I think ultimately the solution to the parking problem is improved rapid transit.
Nancy Shepard.
Well, thank you, and this is something that we've been rigorously working on, and we're going to be rolling out residential parking permits in January for the first neighborhoods downtown that the city's been working with right now. For mitigations for the neighborhoods, actually mitigations for the workers. I'm a strong supporter of trying to reduce traffic generally all over town by 30% with the strategies that we've already taken a look at, which is to do business subsidies, get the businesses to pay for subsidies so that workers are actually subsidized for using public transit when they come into town, having good, efficient public transit. I also am interested in seeing expansions to our parking garages. I'm really proud of the fact that we have eliminated all parking exemptions on new buildings so that all buildings are fully parked. And as we start to do these, and then also pivoting if we have any unintended consequences as these new programs roll out for the neighborhoods. Thank you.
C. Reddy.
I live in College Terrace, and I have 2 parking permits for 2 cars. And it works beautifully in College Terrace. I live on Stanford Avenue, and I'm grateful for that. I think we want to continue to do similar things in the other neighborhoods to expand the program. But I want to also explore with Stanford, taking some burden off of the parking areas we have here and moving across. When we have a football game, they all park everywhere. I know a lot of people are skeptical about negotiating with Stanford. I want to meet with them and understand how we can support them, how they can support us in some alleviating parking. And we could maybe take it there and then bring people into businesses in downtown area. But I do want to look at an innovative way. Thank you.
Our next question relates to traffic. What do you see as our most serious traffic issue, and how do you propose to fix it? A.C. Johnston.
Well, the most serious traffic issue is there's too much of it. We get stuck in traffic jams and waste a lot of time and obviously energy in doing that. Another issue is traffic around schools at school start times and ending times. On the school traffic, I think we can work with the school district to try to stagger the start times so that not everybody is going to school at the same time. On some of the other traffic issues, I know, for example, they're looking at grade separation at the intersection of Page Mill Road and the Foothill Expressway, which is a serious traffic issue, and I think that's something that bears close study.
Nancy Shepard.
All right, I'm just going to list them. Embarcadero Road is really awful with those 3 signals. City's working on that right now, and they're working with the Pali parents right now to get better bicycling into Pali. Arastradero Road is still a mess. I agree with the grade separation, but in the meantime, buses do go in there for the students right now, and I really would like to work on getting bus passes for students so that they can freely ride those buses. Particularly, though, the most important thing for me is when Caltrain gets modernized in 2019, we're going to have a train every 5 minutes during commute. So we're going to have even more traffic. And so the rail grade separation study that I launched with my colleagues last year to look at whether or not we can trench or if we need to grade separate, if we actually need to go and do those overhead and underhead kind of things for traffic. We get to look at that and decide as a community how it is we want to build out our rail corridor so that we can actually open up even more routes east and west and make Palo Alto more fluid.
John Frederick.
I believe we need an integrated rail system around the bay, either BART down the East Bay and Caltrain down the peninsula here. And I believe if that were the case, we'd need a terminal of some sort, a depot there at San Jose. As far as the traffic on the streets, I believe that the Page Mill, El Camino intersection is the worst, and the F-grade intersections on Junipero Serra Freeway. And I don't support graded interchanges at those intersections. I would like to see Arastradero turned back into 2 lanes each way.
C. Reddy.
I think the traffic is one of the biggest headaches we have during prime time. Hundreds and thousands of cars go in and out of El Camino Real and also entering Embarcadero. The one thing I really think we need to do is to make it really safe so we will never have any accidents right next to the high schools we have, and also middle schools and elementary schools. But I think we need to begin somewhere, and we need to have an overpass so the kids do not get out of the car while there's a red light. So I want to put a whole lot of priority on making sure that that happens. And then I want, again, innovative way to transport, with new ideas like I mentioned the other day with the system in London they have, a tube. There are a lot of smart engineers that can figure out a way to move us around. Thank you.
Wayne Douglas.
I have a hard time getting excited about traffic because I know where all the bottlenecks are, and I don't go there. Now, a lot of people probably have a choice, or don't have a choice. They have children who are going to Pali or to any of the other schools, and they worry about it, and rightly so. But I'm not a traffic design guy. I'm actually willing to listen to experts who will give me, although every single study that I can think of that Palo Alto has launched to try to mitigate these problems gets challenged as insufficient, loaded in some way, and I don't know a way around that. It could be a sign of exactly how disenchanted the general population is. But it's not an easy problem, and with, especially with Pali, where you've got train tracks in the way and everything else, it ain't going to be easy.
Mark Weiss.
I want to use my precious 60 seconds here to give a shout out to Safe Routes to School. People like Penny Elson, Stefan Grossner, Sid Espinoza did a lot of work with that. I remember the opening of the improved intersection at crossing El Camino at Stanford Avenue. What used to be Mountain Mike's back in the day is a Starbucks. Star Teach Out, always riding her bike. I happen to ride my bike here tonight. I live at Oak Creek. My girlfriend, the former Arts Commissioner Terry Acebo Davis, who is also an emergency room nurse, she lives on Bryant. And we want to encourage everyone to continue wearing their helmets, especially the college kids don't wear their helmets. It's sort of a regional issue. I think El Camino is actually Highway 82. It's actually, I believe, a state jurisdiction. Certainly we can improve some of the traffic lights. People are complaining about, in front of Pali and stuff like that. Be safe out there, people.
Our next set of questions relate to development within the city. The first is related to the 50-foot height limit. Projects are requesting to exceed the 50-foot height limit, yet there has not been a policy discussion on if or when this limit should be exceeded. What do you think about the limit? First, we'll hear from Nancy Shepard.
Well, obviously, this is very controversial with some members of our community, and yet at the same time, it's also controversial with some of the designs that we're having. Now, I'm not willing to go over the 50-foot height limit unless, well, I think we did do that just recently with the Equinox project, but we had no net new square footage, and we were going to have that 5-foot anyway because that was the mechanical space. And we also got something out of it, which was a deeper sidewalk. Now, that being said, actually, the architectural buildings that people like the best, being University Arts over here, is well over the 50-foot height limit. And if people are interested in looking at getting outside of the boxy designs, I think we as a community should talk about that. I'm not prepared to go there yet, but I am prepared to have that conversation. Also, you know, what are the conversations around going up? Pali just put their theater in, it's 86 feet high, and nobody complained about it. If we have a theater here, can we go into the 50-foot height limit while not going to market?
Got to cut you off there. Next, we're going to hear from John Frederick.
I was here during the hospital fight with R.V. Lee and the Medical Foundation. I was here for the super block, and I believe in the 50-foot limit without exceptions. And that means no gazebos, no rocket launch pads, anything like that. 50 feet means 50 feet.
A.C. Johnston.
I think the 50-foot height limit is important, but I think there are circumstances where it would be worth looking at relaxing it. I'm very interested in seeing if there's a way of encouraging development of a broader spectrum of moderately priced housing in Palo Alto. If in order to do that, a developer said, well, we need to go a little bit higher, not a lot higher, but a little bit higher than 50 feet in order to get another story in to make the project viable, I would be willing to look at that. I would want to get significant concessions in return, like setbacks, so that you don't have a massive building built right on the sidewalk going up more than 50 feet. I would make sure that there was plenty of air space, if you will, around the building. But I think it would be a rare exception, but there may be exceptions.
C. Reddy.
I like the 50-foot limit. Thank you. I like the 50-foot limit. You know, when you go to town and country shopping center, there's something sexy about it. You know, this is Stanford, this is nice. We're here, we're not going to put up with big structures. So let's keep it that way, unless somebody donates the $200 million to the city or something. We'll talk about it. You know how beautiful it is to see Stanford, and we're compatible. So why not keep it this way? This is what Palo Alto has been, so why change it? That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Corey Walbach.
I also think it's very important that we expand low and moderate income housing in Palo Alto. As I mentioned before, people are getting priced out of Palo Alto, and it's getting really rough, and it's destroying our community. But I don't think that it's necessary to break our 50-foot height limit in order to do that. There's an awful lot that we can do within 50 feet with good design that's beautiful, that's walkable, that's lovely, that will enhance our physical character and allow people to live here. Also, I do not hear an upswell of demand for breaking the 50-foot height limit. If we're going to do that, honestly, I think that should be a referendum. I think that's something that we should put to the public. But I don't see that happening for a very long time in Palo Alto. I would not support overturning it.
Our next question relates to high-density housing and has two parts. What are your thoughts on high-density housing in Palo Alto, such as creating smaller, under 800 square feet units to provide more affordable housing? And the second part, what are the best locations for additional housing? We'll begin with Greg Scharf.
Thank you. I support looking at smaller units. I think micro units are a thing where it's proven in other markets. In San Francisco, I think it would work really well in Palo Alto. It provides truly affordable housing that people can rent and can afford. I think micro units only really work as rental housing. I think that it needs to be really near transport, probably in California Avenue area or downtown for that kind of housing. We started looking at that housing, and I also think it has much less impact on our schools, that kind of housing. It meets your ABAG numbers. There's all sorts of advantages to looking at that. I also think that small units generally provide, especially near transit, people won't necessarily need a car. A lot of the younger generation doesn't want a car. I know that my daughter, for instance, doesn't want a car and lives right near the Caltrain station and either comes up to Palo Alto or Mountain View or the city, and when necessarily uses a zip car. So I think there's lots of ways that small units meet the next generation's needs.
Wayne Douglas.
Greg is right, especially about the possibilities that nobody will be using cars. I like to brag that when I came to California, I lived in this state for 5 years before I bought a car. And I found a job in Cupertino, and I was able to get there using public transportation. Later, I was shifted to Santa Clara, where it was easier to use public transportation. Density housing, sure. I'm all for housing. Remember, I'm the homeless guy. I'm trying to find places for people to live who don't have a whole lot of money. Yeah, more of it, as much as we can get. And if it's smaller, that's fine too. But as long as we got some. Thank you.
Karen Holman.
So I'm in favor of smaller units and particularly smaller rental units, and my interest is having those units near jobs and having those housing units committed to local employers and employees. One example of that might be the Fry's site. Palo Altans are more likely to walk or bike to work than they are to take the train or the bus. So it makes a lot of sense to put those housing units deed restricted to nearby employers. Another thing that is a frustration of mine actually is that Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG as it's commonly known, talks about zoning for housing to create housing. But actually, it really, I don't think, is about that. And we have pushed back a lot against ABAG, but we lose a lot of housing units every year. And ABAG doesn't count them. We don't count them. It doesn't seem to matter. So it really isn't about housing creation and helping to balance that jobs housing ratio. So I think we need to push back even harder.
Nancy Shepard.
Well, these are the types of size of units that I think some seniors are interested in having when they no longer need to live out in a neighborhood, get close to transit. So I would be interested in seeing these types of units tucked into California Avenue, maybe downtown, someplace that is senior friendly. Also, I've seen these units go down to 400 square feet. My son actually had a mini unit down in Los Angeles for 263. I think that that's too small, but I think that that type of housing is something that we already have a market for with people that do not want to live in the suburbs or in the neighborhoods of Palo Alto when they get older.
Mark Weiss.
This is an incredibly biased question. I would call it like a push-pull. To answer the second part, I would put these in East Palo Alto, not near Fry's, near Home Depot, or in Milpitas, or on one of Peter Thiel's floating islands up near the Farallons. I would say, why don't we talk about rent control, something more realistic that affects more people here that are already here. I would say this is a developer-pushed. ABAG is a biased entity. I'm not an economist. My classmate and teammate Brian Evans at Foothill is an economist. How many houses would we have to build before the prices would become affordable? No one has answered that at all. I've lived here since '74. I'm a gun graduate. I'm a Dartmouth graduate. I studied English and I read policy and philosophy and government at Dartmouth. No real Palo Altans want to live above or below any other Palo Altans.
John Frederick.
I've promoted this quite vigorously in my statements online, the PAN questionnaire, and my website, Votes for Frederick. I believe secondary units, accessory units, are a great way to help meet some of those ABAG numbers. especially in that it shows good faith on our part, and on large lots, on corners, or on alleys, and next to commercial zones, they would fit quite nicely. The housing plan here, the housing element, suggests that lots in the 7,000 to 10,000 square foot range would be suited for a 400 to even 900 square foot habitat. So I support that, and I believe it should be a priority.
Our next question relates to cumulative impacts. Commercial projects are evaluated on an individual basis without looking at the cumulative impact on intersections, traffic, and spillover parking in neighborhoods. How can the council exercise greater stewardship over this negative cumulative impact? We'll begin with Tom Du Bois.
So cumulative impacts are definitely a problem, and we need better data collection and better measurement to really consider projects not in isolation, but in the surrounding neighborhood. We already have in our zoning, that buildings should be considered in context. And that doesn't mean necessarily appearance, but it means context in terms of overall mass and impacts, surrounding impacts. When we look at these impacts too, I think we really need to make sure that whoever's causing the impacts are paying their fair share. Currently, most of the general fund is coming from residents rather than commercial property owners, and a lot of these impacts are being paid for by residents, and that's just not right. It should really be paid by the people causing the problems.
Eric Filseth.
Yeah, so I think that what you're talking about here is one of the most important problems that the city faces, right? Maybe, arguably the most important, which is, we are a built-out city. We need a plan, okay, that factors this stuff into account. And that's a very, very complicated thing, right? But we need to take a system view and we need to understand all the impacts. And I think it's so important that I think the next council needs to own it itself. The council is responsible for vision, policy, and oversight. And this is very clearly a piece of vision. I think the council needs to own this and drive this, okay, and then adapt zoning to implement it, right? So I think the answer that's much more complicated than 10 seconds. I think the council we need a plan and that considers all this. Because right now we do too much tactically and too much sporadically.
Karen Holman.
Thank you. Actually, current regulations are that we do need to consider cumulative impacts. I'm not sure we're always that good in doing it. Part of that has to do with data collection. Part of it has to do with our methods of analysis. We also have a comprehensive plan, a current comprehensive plan that actually is, I think, a quite good document. And in association with the comprehensive plan, there is a comp plan EIR, Environmental Impact Report, which also evaluates the overall and cumulative effects of the build-out that would be allowed under a comprehensive plan. So in addition to that, the individual projects do get evaluated. And I think we could do a better job with our data collection in order to evaluate those. The other thing that we have to do in terms of cumulative impacts, it's not just about Palo Alto development, it's also about our neighboring communities. We're being impacted heavily by Mountain View and Menlo Park development also, and we need to consider those more carefully and more closely and more comprehensively in our project evaluations.
Greg Scharf.
I agree, we need much better data collection. And yes, the comprehensive plan and there's an EIR that goes along with it. We need to make sure that we have much better data and much better analysis in that and come up with a plan. And Karen's completely right about, it's not just Menlo Park and Mountain View. I mean, if you notice what's going on in Redwood City, I mean, they've already come up with their 500,000 square foot cap and going over that. So we're being surrounded by, lots and lots of development. And so we need to take all of that into consideration and plan for it and look very carefully at those cumulative impacts. And I think cumulative impacts are one of those things that are the hardest to get your arms around and how you deal with it. And I think we have to really focus on that and do that.
Lydia Koo.
I think that we need definitely better planning and design. Traffic reports that are generated needs to be unbiased, and staff needs to collect and analyze data or information, understanding that it's not using national standards, but rather local standards. And I agree with both Karen and Greg that this is a regional effort. It's not going to be handled locally. It does have to be reached out. Staff needs to reach out to all the neighboring cities as well as regional to curb all of the impacts that's coming along towards us. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Walbach.
There are a few things that we can do to address the impacts of development. One of them is really to expand our use of specific or concept area plans, where you start with a really robust community input process. Some of the current council members, even some people up here, were involved in doing something like this for the South Forest area, and I commend their work. The community knew what they were getting, they helped shape the vision, and people were happy with the results, even if it wasn't what was there before. That's the model that we should use going forward. There are a couple other specifics. Step downs, where you can say that, the building next to a building can't be, if you're building a tallish building within our 50-foot height limit next to one story, that's not okay, but you could say you could build up in, steps up from building to building to building, creates a nicer built environment. And also our transit management agency that looks like we might be finally getting online that will really help take care of, hopefully, transportation. Thanks.
Our next question relates to the Buena Vista site. Our current comprehensive plan states that the city has a duty to preserve and maintain Buena Vista as a mobile home park if feasible, and that it provides the city an important source of affordable housing. How do you see the city doing so? Are there other viable alternatives? Lydia Koo.
The comprehensive plan states that the city council and staff are to find grants in order to help Buena Vista Mobile Home Park to remain. I believe that that is a ordinance in the comprehensive plan, and so that should be better vetted and staff to work harder on it. But also, and another consideration is the offer that was given to the Maybell site. That should be also visited as to why we can't do the same offer here for the Buena Vista residents.
Eric Filseth.
Well, I think all of us understand that the Buena Vista situation is a huge tragedy, right? I think first and foremost, you have to recognize the role of current city development practices in that situation. If the huge jobs to housing ratio that we've created over the last few years has driven up the price of land in Palo Alto and the demand for it. And without that, it's unlikely that the Buena Vista land would be worth as much as it is to a developer, which is the source of the problem, right? As to what can be done for the Buena Vista situation right now, it's a very, very difficult problem. I don't know that it's appropriate that the city goes back and attempts to change something right now. I think one of the things that we need to do, I hope that the situation can be resolved there. I think one of the things the city needs to do is look around the city. Are there other places where this might happen in the future, and act now with zoning, possibly parts of Ventura, for example, to make sure we intercept this problem early. Okay.
Thank you. Wayne Douglas.
Well, that's our next crisis. We had people living in cars at the old high school. Now we have people living in trailers who have lived there for decades. There are generations of people who have lived in Buena Vista, all under the assumption, and I'm sure that was true in the city hall too, that this problem was going to be distant. I'm amazed that some previous city council has put in enough safeguards for the residents there that have put us in the bind that we're in now of trying to work our way out of it. Without city intervention, and I mean city acquiring the land, I don't know how we're going to be able to do anything about it. All of the economics are against another way of doing it. I sympathize with the owners. They've carried that property for so many years. It's terribly deteriorated, and it's going to take massive renovation to make it livable.
A.C. Johnston.
Well, the Buena Vista project is actually something that's going to come before the city council, the appeal from the decision that was final today. So it's really not appropriate to speak too directly about that situation. I am strongly in favor of additional affordable housing, and I think it should be a priority for the city council and the city to find places to have additional affordable housing. And I also am very sympathetic to the Buena Vista residents. I'd like to find ways to help them, but I'm not going to talk specifically about that project.
Mark Weiss.
I think it's shameful, the lack of action, decisive action to help our fellow citizens. I want to shout out to the woman in the second row, Winter Dallenbach, for her hard work on this issue. I see 6 or 7 residents. I met a guy on Tuesday named Saul and his wife. I drove through there yesterday afternoon, and I spoke at the Planning and Transportation Committee during oral communications yesterday on this issue. I think we should have reached out and grabbed the owner and brokered a deal. I think that's the American thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. There are people here who talk about, oh, government shouldn't do this or that. I think they're wrong morally and practically. It's a shame.
Tom Du Bois.
I don't want to see anybody forced out of town, particularly with kids in our schools. So if I'm elected, I want to work very hard to find a positive resolution to Buena Vista. And Karen alluded to this when she was talking about ABAG. This is some of our most affordable housing in town. And even if we save it, it's not going to count for our ABAG numbers. And that's really the problem. It's a regional issue. And the construction forces are forcing us all to urbanize. And it's like we're frogs in a pot of water, and we're being slowly boiled to death.
Our next question relates to public trust. A recent survey has found that Palo Altans have a higher level of cynicism and distrust in their city government than those in some other cities. What would you do to restore that trust? Again, we'll hear from Tom Du Bois.
No break. So I'm all about openness and transparency, and I think every candidate's going to say that. But with me, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and I'll do what I say. And I think that's what you should look for in your candidates. We've had some recent issues, and it kind of reminds me of a fox in a hen house. You feel really good when the fox apologizes, but do you want to let him go back in the chicken coop? Not sure you do.
Wayne Douglas.
Ironically, I was interviewed by a reporter today, and I brought up a fairly far-fetched, or at least distant analogy. I went to graduate school at the University of Florida, and I left there. I graduated in 76 and left Florida in 77. Around the time the state of Florida passed what they called the Sunset Law, and you could look over everything. Everything was public, and I mean it was a strict ordinance. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together in the people's name, that's a public meeting, Now, we saw an example of that, strangely enough. I left before anything happened, and most of the politicians in Florida at that time were trying to avoid it. They were killing themselves to find ways around the Sunset Law. So anyway, we saw an example of that, oddly enough, in the Bush election campaign, where people were literally putting together meetings on open fields near the Miami
I'm going to have to cut
airport.
you off there. You can continue it during closing statements later in the evening. Next, we'll hear from Eric Filseth.
Well, I think, the city has taken some tactical steps or proposed some tactical steps, which I think make sense. That we're going to have different policies in case a developer ever offers to buy some city land again and a few other things like that. And, I think there's good things, for specific things, but how often does that happen? I think the real issue here is, there's a culture issue here. And, there's a lot of perception out there in the community of cozy relationships between special interests and various city functions, including the commissions. I think we have a culture of everything is negotiable, right? And I think we need to get away from that and back closer to a culture of this is the code, and if it doesn't meet it, we're not going to do that. I think we ought to take a look at our revolving door policy about when city officials go to work for special interests, right? And finally, the big hammer on culture is you need some new blood.
John Frederick.
I believe money is a problem. I think certain structural rigidities are a problem. I think the reporting in the press is a problem. I think some of these small newspapers are very focused on selling houses, not in reporting the political news. I would exempt the Weekly from that. They're reporting on both the Maybell situation and the Arriaga scandal over there at 27 University was clear, precise, and very good at informing the public. I like Jim Tower's old saying that the water's not going to clear up till we get the hogs out of the stream. And I think when you're dealing with things like oligarchic capture of the democratic process, you need to consider that.
Karen Holman.
Going back to my days on Planning and Transportation Commission, and then continuing on to my role as a city council member, one of the first colleagues' memos that I was a part of and authored, again, that's a council initiative, was to limit council member meetings with applicants, was to stop last-minute applicant presentations or project submittals at the council, and to argue for and get earlier packet release so the public has better access to that. 27 University, which was subject to a civil grand jury report, I publicly and privately objected to that process and what was going on. That's borne out by the public records requests. I also think we need to have clearer project item descriptions so that people are more aware of what the project is, an item is that's being considered and discussed by the council. And I invite people to look at the quote that I've used oftentimes. It's in front of City Hall in the pavement there, and it talks about how government is a trust, and that is a responsibility and something I think we need to take very seriously.
A.C. Johnston.
How do you restore the public trust? Be more open. I think that, you're entitled to know what's going on. I think it's incumbent on the City Council to make everything public that it possibly can. I would make an affirmative effort to get out in the community so that I could tell people what's going on and listen to you, get your questions and listen to you about what's on your minds. So I think that would go a long way to actually having a dialogue between city officials and you, the community, and that would really build a sense of trust if you understood that we were listening to you.
Next, we will hear from Lydia Koo. Before you speak, just if the PAN organizers could bring up the first round of audience questions. We'll be just starting those in just a few minutes, so I look forward to getting those. Lydia?
Definitely changing culture and values at City Hall. And for us to remember for the council members to remember who they're representing. It's you, the residents. And it's not going to be an easy task over here changing culture. This type of culture is long embedded, and it's deeply embedded, and it's been long term, so it's going to take time. But mainly, it's going to need new leadership at council, and so choose carefully.
C. Reddy.
Thank you. Trust is something that you cannot make it up in the next 15 minutes and say, trust me. It's based on track record. You got to go see what kind of values they have and what they've done in the past so we can predict the future. So I would recommend look at the track record and who has been, a crook is always a crook. So I would watch out for those people that are that type. I would look for nice people that have good track record. And go from there. It's like a hemoglobin A1C blood count. It tells you last 3 months what it has been. So it's not like you can't lie about it. On the same day. So please look up everybody's record and see what they've done in their life. Thank you.
Greg Scharf.
Yes, trust in government is extremely important. And that's really why I've come to the conclusion that we need to get rid of the PC process. I think it erodes public trust. We are going to get the packets out 12 days earlier. As long as council agrees, we went through this in policy and services recently. I think that's really important. Gives people much more of a chance to look things over and comment earlier. I also think we need to vote, and I've pushed this at council, before we go into closed session. And that goes to the culture change. People need to think before we go into closed session and ask themselves, can we do this in public? And I think that's very important. And then you won't have issues where people are like, wow, I didn't know this happened, or that you get into closed session. I think it's really important that we sit down as a council and say, do we want to go into closed session? I also think we're moving in that direction. We have it on our agenda on Monday night to do the professional and managers groups compensation in public. I think that's a huge part of the budget, and I think we should do that.
Nancy Shepard.
I think that this is an ailment across the country, and I know it certainly was the way I felt about the state when they were going to, do a massive build through Palo Alto. But last year, it was really clear to me that that the city council had read a community wrong. So I strategized this year and made it a focus that we went out and had a deep community conversation about our future. And this is what I've been calling the Our Palo Alto. I wanted staff to be with the community so that the community could see staff. And have some trust with staff to learn that they are really working hard and they are actually quite skilled. A couple of the other things that I've been doing is I've been asking closed session items to come before us in the public first. For example, Cubberley on Monday night, we'll be taking that up publicly, and we will be voting to go into closed session. Early packet release is something I've been working with the city manager on. I'm very much in favor of doing that. Thank you.
Mark Weiss.
Speaking of our Palo Alto, I went to 3 or 4 of those events. I think it's a $350,000 boondoggle. I think it was just a ridiculous idea and a waste of money, and they weren't really listening to us. They were reading from scripts. They had plants. It really wasn't a dialogue. Further, we've spent $1.7 million on a consultant to gut the comp plan rather than ratifying it and renewing it. We're flushing it into the bay. Our comp plan is fine. A little bit of tweaking will be fine. The grand jury, Santa Clara County grand jury, on June 16th of this year said we were secretive and non-responsive in our dealings with one very powerful developer and 2 projects. I want to know, is this the tip of the iceberg or is it an isolated incident? I tend to think it's a big, big problem. I ran for council in 2012 saying we already had a problem where downtown interests like developers were getting heard and residents were not. I agree with Mr. Frederick that the press is incredibly biased, including the one that he likes.
Corey Wolbach.
This is something that I've worked on in the past. I spent a summer in DC when I was in college doing an internship trying to lay the groundwork for a national campaign to improve campaign finance. There are a few things that we can really do. Myself, just voluntarily, I established a couple of campaign limits before I declared. 1, I don't take a dime from developers. 2, I don't take a dime from labor unions. 3, I don't take a dime over $500 per person. Happy to have you volunteer, donate up to that, but I want to be really clear that my loyalty is to the city, to the people, and that can only happen when it's clear that your support is broad-based. And thank you to everybody who's helped out in various ways. Also, our default should be for open meetings. We should be more careful with the consent calendar. We should either eliminate or significantly reform the PC process. Of course, again, I prefer specific or area plans where there's more community involvement. We should better digitize and display the plan for development projects online so people can see what's going to be happening in their neighborhood. And I'll look into that.
Thank you very much, candidates. The lightning round continues with questions now from the audience. Everybody can take a deep breath. We're done with the first round. Now we turn to audience questions. The first is for AC Johnston. How would you maximize Palo Alto's contributions to greenhouse gas reduction?
Well, there are several things we could do. Obviously, the more we can get people out of cars and onto bikes or walking, that would be very helpful. But I think the one single thing that I can think of is we have an incinerator. We now incinerate a lot of our waste and the incinerator is coming to the end of its useful life. I think we should replace this incinerator with an anaerobic digester, which will be able to generate power and prevent release of greenhouse gases. Thank you.
There are people who have been collecting them. There you go. The next question is for two candidates. The first, John Frederick. What would you do about the low, loud flying airplanes impacting neighbors across Palo Alto?
I would suggest watching that Simpsons episode, Krusty Goes to Congress, in which they suggest moving the airplanes over the poorer parts of town.
The same question for Mark Weiss.
Last week I went to the Neighbors Abroad party for our 7th sister city, Chayanura, Japan. It was a wonderful event. I think a couple other, Nancy was there, I think Karen was there. And I think at our panel at the Daily News the next day, nobody at that panel of, I think 5 of us candidates said they went to the airport day. It's kind of an anomaly. I'm not strong on that issue. I'm not a big supporter of the airport. Yeah, where we live, I hear at 7 in the morning. I think it is a kind of a nuisance. I don't really know what to think of it. I'm not an expert on it, but it is affecting our quality of life a little bit. I'm willing to learn more about the airport if somebody wants to contact me and give me a tour, but for now I think it's kind of a nuisance. I know there are safety and policy reasons to have an airport, but...
The next question is for Karen Holman. Explain the conversion from retail to offices at Lytton Gateway, Zabibo, Varsity.
Well, I spoke earlier about, in 2009, how I opposed the conversion of some of the ground floor retail space to allow office space. Zabibo, Jungle Copy, Rudy's, Jungle Copy actually twice. All of those are a result of having a lack of ground floor retail where it should be and where it was previously. I think it's 135 Hamilton, the new building that's going in, that previously was a ground floor retail protected area. It's no longer. Ground floor retail protects not only the services that are provided to the city, it also provides a more general revenue stream for the city. And we have, actually, in my opinion, we have too much of a proliferation of some specific uses, and because that displaces the diversity of uses as well.
The next question is for Eric Filsuf. Per person, low-density development uses far more energy than high. How do you reconcile sustainability with low or no growth policy?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Per person, low-density development uses far more energy than high. How do you reconcile sustainability with low or no growth policy?
Well, I don't think I've ever been an advocate of a no growth policy. I think what we need to do is we need to get very, very deliberate about how much we're going to grow and how we're going to do that, right? I think you know, energy use is one aspect of this, but there's a lot of aspects of high growth that are not good either. You know, you build giant buildings, you know, concrete is one of the dirtiest things in the world, right? So I think what the city needs to do is to figure out how much we're going to grow, both in terms of commercial and in housing. Obviously, the number's not 0, but it's not infinite either. And I think we need to get very, very systematic about how we're going to do this. I do not believe that it's in the best interest of Palo Alto residents to do things on the sort of high-density agenda, like putting you know, big towers near train stations, for example. I don't see how that benefits the community to have people here that commute to San Francisco and so forth. I think we need to take an approach that benefits the community, right, with that as a consideration.
The next question is for Lydia Koo. In the past, new developments, such as that at Alma Plaza, have taken place that seem out of line with the comp plan. How do you plan to enforce the comp plan when future developments are proposed?
The planned community process, while it's been misused and abused, it can be something that is workable for affordable housing. Now, these kind of buildings such as Alma Plaza or even 2180 El Camino, these are something that needs to be regulated, as well as ensure that all the exceptions, that there's no exceptions to them. And in addition to that, whatever public benefits are stated should actually benefit everybody in Palo Alto.
The next question is for Greg Scharf. Why did you support Lytton Gateway and 240 Hamilton? Don't you think we have overdeveloped downtown?
So I supported Lytton Gateway because it was a fully parked building. It has a strong transit demand management policy embedded in it that reduces cars by 20% in the building, and it has teeth in it. It's one of the first PCs that actually has teeth for a traffic demand management policy. It's the first building that is fully parked, frankly, and also it provided a real benefit, which I think we needed as a town. It provides $2 million towards a new parking garage. And as I've advocated strongly for new parking garages downtown, the fact that we had $2 million there and that we then enforced parking fees. When Lytton Gateway came in, there was $75,000 in the parking fund. There's now almost $5 million. We're going to build a new parking garage. It costs about $10 million, and that provides the seed money for that. Lytton Gateway is also right next to transit. Frankly, putting that kind of a building right next to transit, if you're going to have new office space, that's the right place to do it.
God, I cut you off there.
Sorry.
The next question is for two candidates. The first will be Corey Walbach. What is your proposed timing and process for working with the school district on addressing development at Cubberley? How would you like that property to be redeveloped?
Thanks for the question. Well, we need to get to work immediately. The buildings are falling apart. For those who don't know, Cubberley provides a lot of really important benefits for the community currently. My own dad takes a class there, and a lot of people take classes there. We have artists working there. We have a number of services which are very important for Southern Palo Altans like myself. Also, the school district is going to probably need some more school sites, whether high school, junior high school, and or elementary school. So what we need to do is start working rapidly. My timeline is soon. There's already been a lot of work done on the Cubberley plan. I think we need to start implementing it. We might need to make a couple of tweaks to the current plan, but it's very good. It's a good working document. A lot of people in the community put tons of work into it, and we should thank them and put it into practice.
Same question for Nancy Shepard.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank those members of the Cubberley process as well. I'm hoping Monday night we're going to be going through this, so I'm hoping that we get to have a long-term lease. I would like to take the Cubberley process and actually start to own the type of community center that has been built there by the residents, because they've taken it over, not taking it over as an occupying it, but they love it as a community center. They love the dance classes, they love the preschools and the childcare that's there, in addition to all of the, all of the other tenants that are there as well. And try to figure out how we can take our 8 acres and configure it in such a way so if the schools do have to take it back for a school, that we can configure out how to keep that as a community center that's vibrant for this particular part of Palo Alto. And I think that we've got a lot of guiding principles already with the plan that the Cubberley Committee put together. Thank you.
Our next question is also addressed to 2 candidates. The first will be C. Reddy. Do you support Measure B to fund infrastructure?
I do not.
If you could put it on your mic.
Yeah. I do not. Thank you.
Also for Tom Du Bois.
Yeah, I do support it, and I talked a little bit about this earlier. So this is the occupancy tax, and again, a lot of the impacts that we're seeing have been caused by overdevelopment, commercial development, and so I think it's only fair that we look at using these taxes on hotels to help mitigate some of the impacts.
Thank you. The next question will be answered by all candidates. We will go through in reverse alphabetical order since we did the last one in alphabetical. Beginning with Corey Walbach. What is your position on the size of the City Council and why?
Great question. I am not in favor of reducing the City Council from 9 members to 7, as Measure D this year would do if it passes. This really comes down to a question of what kind of City Council we want. Do we want a somewhat part-time, or essentially part-time, oversight committee that represents the breadth of the community, or do we want full-time politicians? We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday at the League of Women Voters Forum, and I said, the question there was actually, do you support full-time pay for City Council members? And I said, only if the council size is reduced, because then it would be an indication that the public really wants full-time politicians to be their City Council. But that's not traditionally what the Palo Alto City Council has been about. The City Council is about understanding the community, representing the breadth of the community, providing policy guidance, and providing oversight.
Mark Weiss.
This was going to be part of my closing statement, but since I finally got to talk, I'll use it here. I ran for council in 2012. I got nearly 6,000 votes without spending a dime, and Tim Gray and I were running as residentialists in 2012. I didn't spend a penny on my campaign, got 6,000 votes. It is not so now there's a group of newcomers, in my opinion, calling themselves residentialists and saying, only vote for us 2 or 3 or whatever. It is not so much what happens in this race that will determine the future of Palo Alto. And this is a very serious moment. I think it's actually what you people end up doing, leaning in, speaking out. We need maybe 500 people to really start going to meetings and paying attention. This is really, really critical. So I think this ballot measure is quite cynical, quite ridiculous. It's a power grab by the establishment. Reject it. Stinks.
Nancy Shepard.
Okay, well, since I was one of the members of council that put this on the ballot, it's been put on the ballot because ever since I've moved here and learned we had a 9-member council, I've heard people complain about how large the council is. I am not taking a position on it purposefully because this is a charter change, and with many of the charter changes, I really would like the community to tell us how they want to be governed. And so, but there are 2 principles that I have learned that I wanted to share tonight that I haven't shared before. One is that when we have a lot of, well, not a lot, but we sometimes have like a 7-2 vote right now. That might change or could change to 5-2, which means that sometimes people with different thinking and points of view might be able to get to the majority. On the other hand, I've heard the argument that it might shut out some people from parts of the community that might not be able to get on council. So I just am asking people to think wisely. I think Palo Alto will be fine either way. Most councils are 5 members if you're a general law city, and 7 when you're a charter city, but not 9 like we are. Thank you.
Greg Scharf.
I strongly oppose it. 9 members on council functions well. You get diverse viewpoints. Diverse viewpoints are great. You really want a whole range of opinion on council. You don't want monolithic thought. You want to have as little groupthink as possible. And the more you have 9 people, you're likely to have someone say, well, wait a minute, why don't we try it this way? And it's surprisingly where that comes from. On council, when I sit up there, I can't predict who's the person that's going to come up with the next great idea, the next direction we move. And that's really critically important. And also, what do we gain by doing this? We gain nothing. I've been in council meetings where we have 7 people. They take as long. And the other thing, in Palo Alto, we value transparency, openness, working together, and over efficiency. And the notion that we're going to cut out viewpoints and views just to have a possibility of having shorter meetings, I think that's silly. So I would urge you all to vote no.
C. Reddy.
I would like to keep it at 9 or a little bit more. I think more important is to have more women representation. There are 51% women in this society. So I would rather see more ladies here. And as well as I think the citizens need to kind of look at to see that there is a uniform representation or a good representation from College Terrace, South Palo Alto, North Palo Alto, and all these areas that we represent. So I think that's up to you to decide. So please think about that when you vote this time. I'm from College Terrace, and I love it there, and I'm going to represent my fellow neighbors as much as I can, God willing. Thank you.
Lydia Koo.
I'm against reducing the number. The argument is that it is for efficiency. However, like Greg said, I don't see efficiency even when there are a couple of council members absent. However, I find it interesting that when this item came up on the agenda for vote, that a council member, it was very ambivalently voted on. And so moving this to the ballot, I think that was just a very, very cavalier way of moving this item to such a big matter on a ballot. I'm not in favor, and I think the lesser number also eliminates diversity on council. Thank you.
AC Johnston.
So I'm not taking a position on this. I understand the arguments on both sides. I think there's some strong arguments on both sides. But I know that this is an issue that has come up from time to time, and I think it's really important that it's on the ballot so that the community can speak, because either way that it comes out, it'll be your decision, and that's good.
Karen Holman.
I do not support reducing the council from 9 to 7. This is a very engaged community, and the workload is pretty immense at council. We have Stanford University, our own utilities. We're about to take over the airport. And I am really concerned that reducing that workload from 9 council members to 7 will further make this more of a, pardon the word, but elitist council. It's a lot of sacrifice to be able to serve on council. And so I don't think the efficiency argument really stands the test. There are a lot of ways to be more efficient at council meetings. I have been a proponent for a long time, and we have made improvements in improved staff reports. I think there's a good ways to go there that would stop some of the questioning at council and ahead of council meetings, for that matter. And another thing is I think we can do a better job with agenda management. And as to council member comments at the meetings, I guess that one of the first steps to recovery is to recognize that there's a problem.
John Frederick.
I oppose this measure. I believe the council should remain at 9. I was gratified to see Vic Ojakian here making the mention of the fact before council that charter changes like this should be scrutinized clearly and debated openly before they even get to the ballot. And so if you're going to do something like direct election of mayor, term limits, district elections, or my favorite proposal is a 2-year term of office, you should discuss that at great length before you put it to the voters. I'm against it.
Eric Filseth.
Boy, everybody seems to be against this. And I'm not sure actually where the impetus to do this came from, but I'm not in favor of it. You know, the arguments in favor of keeping it at 9 are the workload and the Stanford recusal issue and the sheer size of the city operations. The city manages a $500 million budget. And I know it's not an exact analogy, but a 9-member board would be absolutely not out of line on a $500 million publicly traded company. The most compelling argument that I've seen in favor of reducing it has to do with the length of meetings, but I think better preparation and meeting management, can solve that. So I don't see that the arguments for reducing it are compelling enough for a charter change.
Wayne Douglas.
Mark is right, it stinks. Greg is right. It only contributes, if you reduce the size of the city council, to groupthink. And I already said earlier this week on another forum, we don't need more of that. So I oppose it.
Tom Du Bois.
Yeah, I'm also opposed to the reduction. And again, for me, it's an issue of democratic representation and having those diversity of views. I also think the reduction would provide more power to incumbents. As I said, it wouldn't really shorten the meetings, and a lot of the workload for council is not necessarily the Monday meeting, it's outside of the Monday meeting. So, the question has to be asked, why is this even there? I don't see a strong argument for it at all. I find it kind of shocking that the people that proposed it aren't supporting it. It passed by a 5-4 vote, and it costs the city to put things on the ballot. So that's kind of what shocks me the most. I actually wrote the ballot statement against Measure D, and it was signed by several candidates. So I urge you to vote no.
Our next question will also be answered by all candidates in a random order. How do we get more parks in Palo Alto, and where? Karen Holman?
Well, I authored a colleague's memo, I should say, more honestly, worked on a colleague's memo to dedicate the 7.7 acres abutting Foothill Park most recently, so we have those 7.7 acres dedicated as parkland. We also have some vulnerable areas in Palo Alto. Gamble Garden, for instance, that's not parkland dedicated. There are a variety of places around town that really should be dedicated. They're kind of hanging out there and over time could be vulnerable. So I think what we have, because land is so hard to come by here, I think what we need to do is protect and preserve what we do have. As to creating more parkland, I think the Fry's site, whenever we can get the concept plan to finally come forward on that. The Fry site is one opportunity, and I think we actually ought to increase the requirement for public open space on mixed use and multifamily housing projects.
Mark Weiss?
Thank you, future Mayor Karen Holman, for echoing my statement that I've been saying for a while now about Fry's property, which is 15 acres in Ventura, which is a sort of underutilized, underdeveloped neighborhood. I think the big question is who sets the agenda here? We have very, very serious leadership crisis here. There's crazy stuff going on. So, our Palo Alto is supposedly scoping, but they're feeding us. And they've already decided they're putting 200 homes in Fry's. The briefings from Hillary Gettleman's office to us already says they're putting 200 houses at Fry's. Who made these decisions? Not democratically elected people. Powerful brokers made those decisions. So I was noticing the comp plan and, of course, a white paper by the Parks and Recs says we are in a parks deficit. Our comp plan specifies how many acres per capita we're behind in our parks. Yeah, I'd like to see 7 acres. I'd just like to see 100 houses perhaps at Fry's 7-acre park.
Got to cut you off there. Eric Filsa?
Yeah, well, I think, this is the right kind of question for the community, right? I mean, as Mark, the number is actually 25 acres is what the Parks and Commission report was. We're behind, according to the current comp plans, sort of park space, that's in-town park space per resident. One thing that we can do is when we close parks, and to work on them, we can open them faster. So I happen to live next to El Camino Park, and I used to take my kids out there and play soccer. And El Camino Park closed in September of 2011. The schedule was supposed to be open in the summer of 2013. It's still closed. The current schedule calls it for it to be open in summer of 2015, which is 2 years late. So I think park space is precious, and we shouldn't let it lie fallow like that. The big problem with park space is obviously money. The city has been able to, buy pocket parks, little tiny spaces, but it's going to take a lot of money, and that's one of the reasons that I think we need to be very, very careful about our finances.
Greg Scharf?
Thank you. I think what we need to do is prioritize parks, and that's how we do it. And part of that would be specific area plans, like people talked about at Fry's, where you actually set forth that you will have a certain amount of park space in that. And I also think increasing park fees, not on us, but in terms of on developers and people that build things. We have a park fee currently, and I think it's probably too low, given that we're not getting the parks that call for in the comp plan. And I know we're looking at our fee structures and going through that, and I think that that's the best way to actually create the money to allow us to buy more land for parks.
A.C. Johnston?
I agree we should look for opportunities to find more parks. The specific area plan is a good example. We live in the SOFA area and have the great good fortune to live right next to Heritage Park, which is just a wonderful open space. Our grandchildren love playing there. So I think we should be looking in developments like that, look for opportunities for additional parkland.
John Frederick?
I would agree about the the Fry's site, I think we need it right now for sales tax purposes, but we should have a long-range plan in which, as a planned community or request for proposal in which that area is developed, park and housing and multi-use, stretching all the way into the CPI structure, which I believe we should amortize over a 30 or 35-year period, because that central location on El Camino there gives an opportunity to meet both those community needs. And I think the protocols that we developed for dealing with the Buena Vista property would give us some training in how to develop major projects like that.
Wayne Douglas.
We clearly need more, especially since I don't have any children. It's not quite as a big deal for me as it would be for many of you, but I sympathize. And I don't know where we're going to get it. I mean, it's as simple as that. We know when virtually every attempt to develop or to change things, we run into that again, you know, and it's not going away. So the Fry's property, why not, you know? The attempt to do it by smaller parks, I have one. I'm in the Ventura neighborhood, so I know how few parks we have. We have Ventura School, which is probably the biggest space around. So good luck.
Corey Walbach.
As somebody who started this campaign with the radical idea that maybe we should actually have more housing, and I'm glad to see other people are getting on board with that idea, I recognize that that also butts up against our interest, and I believe it's in our comp plan, the requirement that we have a certain amount of park space basically as a ratio for our population. So that's very important. So where do we get that? Well, the answer is when developers want to come in and build apartments, which I think is a good thing. I think it's good to have more places for people to live. We do have to require that they provide offsets for that, including park space. Make sure that's built into projects. Again, I'm also very happy to hear that I'm not the only one who thinks that concept area plans are really an important process to use going forward to replace the very flawed planned community process. Ventura, obviously, is a site, as everyone agreed. Another thing I'd like to add, though, is how we access our parks. Foothills Park is probably my favorite place on earth, maybe tied with Yosemite. It's pretty hard to get there unless you have a car. I think we need to have shuttles that go there on a daily basis for those who do not drive.
Tom Du Bois.
I'm a little bit concerned about specific area plans that they may take just as long as our comp plan. But I do think that on the Fry site, we need to have some kind of community service, whether that's a park or a pool. We just need a dedicated service in South Palo Alto. Agree with Karen again that we need to dedicate some of the properties people might not think of as parks, like Gamble Gardens, the Winter Lodge. There's a lot of those properties in the city. We also need to be on the watch out for things like 385 Sherman, which has housing that faces out over a park and it almost privatizes the park. So we need to protect our open space and our existing parks. We also need to invest. I mean, the Baylands Discovery Center needs to be invested in. And finally, I wasn't asked the question about Cumberly, but it is something I really want to dedicate myself to. We need more playing fields in general. And I really think it's time for the city and the school district to get together, move forward on that plan. And as people said, there's been a lot of great work done, not only for a community center and a school, but additional playing fields.
Lydia Koo.
Palo Alto isn't growing land anymore. In order to obtain parkland, the city needs to value lands that are gifted to the city and utilize and make sure that they're definitely tracking these kind of lands that are gifted to the city. I understand that the city has a new software, the Geographic Informational System, so use that to its full advantage. Also, when the city is building communities or putting in developments for housing and so forth, they should really engage the residents in forming those communities, such as the SOFR plan that was previously back in 1995, I believe. And like AC said, that's a very nice park over at a heritage park. When forming these communities also, there is the old bowling alley site that now has a park that nobody knows about.
C. Reddy.
I think we have that thinking that we want more parks and we can do it. I believe College Terrace has two beautiful small little parks. I totally enjoy, right? It's Mayfield Park, and the library itself looks like a park. That's why I moved that area. And I think each owner also can take interest in making it look like a park setting as opposed to concrete. With the lazy approach, we don't need to do anything. So, and also beautify South Palo Alto, put more trees. It looks nice here, but it also needs to look nicer on the south side as well. The third thing is I want to work with Stanford to negotiate shared ownership to, I know you'll say, shared ownership to Stanford Dish. I think we can manage that with them together. Good luck, that's what everybody says, but I want to find out if we have good luck.
Nancy Shepard.
Well, last year when I was on Finance Committee, they did bring forward, staff did, the concept of doing a parks master plan, and I thought that that was really wise to do. So we are taking a look at all of the parks, and these are the city parks, to see what the facilities are, how we need to develop more and modernize. There's 3 parks I know that are undersized, and the policy is that when those are flagged, that if something comes up for sale next to it, the city could consider buying it. But as others have said, we don't have money for that. We have not set aside. Our parks impact fee is just too slow. That's only for brand new housing that we get an impact fee for new units coming into Palo Alto. So I really do think that we should take this up. I think the Parks and Recs Commission has brought this already up to them to their level of thinking that we need to look at funding our parks in a different way. And also, I think we need more dogs in the park. So there's a lot of work that we get to do, and I think we'll be doing that in the master plan process.
I want to thank all the candidates for all of their answers, and whichever candidates should win, especially on this last issue, I implore you to take up that fight. As you may know, 60%, almost 60% of the city is open space or parks, and many of those spaces were only garnered through very difficult community fights, and it takes a fight sometimes to protect our open space, and I see a lot of the leaders who led those fights here in this forum, so thank you for making those commitments, and I look forward to seeing your leadership on that. We come now to the end of our program and closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute. We'll begin with Eric Filseth.
Right, so I think there's a perception that residents in Palo Alto are basically retired folks or billionaires and there's nobody else. But I think there's a lot of gravity towards working families. 2 incomes, kids, a mortgage, trying to save money for your 401k, because I was that way for years and years. And the thing is, when you're that way, you don't have any time to chase around City Hall stuff. And so when something like 27 University, for example, comes along, I pick on that because it's 5 blocks from my house, okay? My neighbors and I, you bet we followed that, okay? I mean, the thing was huge. It's 10 stories. How did that even get to square one, let alone the desk of the city council? But the thing is, when you're working, you have no time to chase this stuff around. And the truth is, it's not a priority, right? Or it's not a top priority. You go, they're going to do what they're going to do, and there's nothing you can do about it, so you go back to your life. So why am I running? I'm running because I can. Because if we get a chance to get involved and we don't step up, then we deserve what we get. So let's do it. Let's secure our future as a moderate density family town with great services and schools. Let's lead.
Got to cut you off. Corey Walbach.
There's an awful lot we didn't get a chance to talk about today. Just a couple of endorsements that I have I'd like to highlight. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters. Please go to my website to see a long list. I'm very flattered by the amount of support I've gotten from people I've worked with, people I know well, people I've known for years. And if you don't know me, come talk to me or talk to some of the people who've endorsed me and ask them why. There are a lot of specific issues we didn't talk about much. I would like to talk more about Buena Vista and homelessness and having regular institutionalized neighborhood meetings, but we'll have to talk after this meeting about that, or email me at votecoreywoolbach.com. If you haven't given up on the idea of an inclusive, a welcoming, a civil, and a sustainable Palo Alto, please vote for Corey Woolbach, and please volunteer for my campaign. Again, I have a lot of self-imposed restrictions on my fundraising. It's going to take your help going out and talking to voters to spread the message. Aside from that, well, have a great evening.
Tom Du Bois.
So hopefully you've heard tonight that nobody's really advocating no growth. This isn't about going back to the past or staying the way we are. It's about how do we move Palo Alto forward based on residential priorities. I have an engineering background, I'm a bit of a data wonk, ready to roll up my sleeves and work for the people of Palo Alto. And when you vote, I think you deserve to know where people stand on an issue. And so I hope you'll look at everybody and really think about how they're going to vote on these issues. In the first 60 days, I want to focus on some specific things. I'd like to reform that assumption about 250 square foot per parking spot. I'd like to bring forth some proposals on how to make council meetings more efficient. And I really like to look at some reforms of our architectural review board. I've been endorsed by over 200 neighbors and community leaders, including the Sierra Club and our county commissioner, Joe Smidian. So if you agree with my vision, I ask for your support and your vote on November 4th.
Nancy Shepard.
I want to thank you for coming tonight, and I also want you to know it's been an honor to serve this community. I have stood up, 20 years ago I stood up for equalizing fundraising in the schools. This last 5 years ago I stood up to make sure we didn't have the most massive development in the city of Palo Alto that was coming from the state, being high-speed rail. We are looking at securing Caltrain. I reach out, I collaborate, that is my style. I'm reaching out to the community this year. That's been my focus as mayor, to go out and make sure we have that rigorous community conversation with everybody from all walks of life so that we can get back to taking up our outdated comprehensive plan to make sure we fit in many of the elements that people are starting to talk to us about so that we can have that boutiqueness of Palo Alto that we like so much. I've been endorsed by Anna Eshoo, Rich Gordon, Jerry Hill, Joe Samidian, and dozens of Palo Altans, many elected leaders, school board members, those types. Please go to my website as well. Thank you.
Off there. Mark Weiss.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Say it loud, say it clear, for the whole round world to hear. I have no idea why I identify with the underclass rather than the fellow Ivy Leaguers here. 1977 at Beth Am, Rabbi Sidney Axelrod at my bar mitzvah, and we have a tape of this. He says, my name is Mark Weiss. He says, I call you Moshe. That's Hebrew for Moses. We expect you to be a leader of your people. Incidentally, I learned later that Steve Levy was he was president of the congregation around that time, and he was about to marry his wife. We found out later. A couple months later, Cheryl Putt-Pricing.
I gotta cut you off, sorry. John Frederick.
Start with a quote, end with a quote. This is from President Eisenhower in 1953. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms in not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. It is 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 6,000. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete highway. We pay for a single fighter with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could house more than 8,000 people. This, I repeat, is the best way of life to be found on the road the world is now taking. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron.
Thank you. C. Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to finish my statement.
C. Reddy.
Thank you all. And I was told that I need to be funny based on Tuesday's performance, so here's one for you. So this chair is usually or normally occupied by Greg Smith. Mr. Smith is a fine councilman. So I look very nice right next to him with his white hair, and my white hair will match. So that's one reason you would want me to be here. The second is you want somebody that has integrity. And I'll be good for 60 days. I counted, my math is still 4 years times 365. So it's not just 60 days, 90 days. I'll be there for you. Give me the input, take me into your home, and tell me what you want me to do, and I will change as we need to change. No, change is inevitable, but we want Palo Alto to be the best place to live on earth. Thank you.
Karen Holman.
Well, thank you again to Palo Alto Neighborhoods for putting this on. And I said earlier, I've brought 13 years of experience to this campaign, including council representation and planning and transportation representation. During that time, I've opposed such projects as Alma Plaza, 101 Lytton, College Terrace Center, and the Palo Alto Bowl Hotel. There's no satisfaction in doing that, but I have to say that those projects have all met with public criticism. They've not been well received by the public. There's a reason for that. I've advocated for transparency, including my comments about 27 University. On the other end of the spectrum, though, I have advocated for also dedicating the 7.7 acres next to Foothill Park, brought forth a proposal for the animal shelter by the Palo Alto Humane Society, the business registry that I mentioned earlier so we can get better data to analyze projects. And to go along with that, my commitment has earned the endorsements of the Sierra Club, Supervisor Joe Simidian, Senator Jerry Hill, Assemblyman Rich Gordon, but most importantly, my endorsements that I'm the most proud of are those that include you and other members and leaders of the community, and I thank you for that.
A.C. Johnston.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I think you've heard somewhat different views of what our future is, but I don't think we need to be afraid of the future and hunker down. I think we're smart enough to figure out how to make this city better as we go forward. I think we can make it more diverse, I think we can make it more exciting, and I think we can make it a place that we continue to be proud to live. I think, as I said earlier, we should be encouraging the development of a broader range of moderately priced housing. I think that will help us continue to make the city vibrant and diverse. Wouldn't it be nice if our children could afford to live here? Wouldn't it be nice if our teachers could afford to live in our community? Wouldn't it be nice if our seniors could downsize and wouldn't have to leave our community to do so? I'm an independent candidate. I will bring a balanced, analytical, reasoned view to the issues that face City Hall. Palo Alto is seen as a leader, and I think we lead best and accomplish most.
Got to cut you off there. Lydia Koo.
I'm going to close with two questions for you to ponder. The first is a classic brain teaser. Why aren't there ants as big as elephants? The answer is that the ants don't have the infrastructure to support that growth. The first thing that people will see is that ants' legs will collapse under the weight of such a large body. And let's not forget the lungs and circulation, the items necessary for life. Second question is, people want to live in Palo Alto for the high quality of life. To accommodate the many people who want to move here for that quality of life, we are told we must reduce our quality of life. Does this make sense? Tonight, I'm asking you for your vote for me, and also to choose carefully and vote for a new council majority of like-minded representatives who places residents' priorities first. Thank you.
Greg Scharf.
Thank you, and I also would like to thank Pan for putting this on and for all of you for coming tonight. We've accomplished a lot in the last 5 years, and I'm really proud of our record. I think things like pension and benefit reform, infrastructure, sustainability, we have 100% carbon neutral electricity with no rate increases in 5 years, and we're still 25% below PG&E. That's an amazing accomplishment. I also have a number of endorsements from Anna Eshoo, Jerry Hill, Senator Rich Gordon, but I'm most proud of the endorsements I have from all of you. I have Sid's endorsement. Thank you very much, Sid. Annette Glankoff, thank you very much. Walt Hayes, I see you in the audience. Thank you very much. And Ken Allen, thank you very much. And a number of others of you in the audience. And I really appreciate that, and that's what matters. It's the community support, it's the grassroots. I mean, it's nice to have Anna Eshoo, Rich Gordon, Jerry Hill, and the Sierra Club, and the League of Conservation Voters. But what really matters is the people who live in Palo Alto, and it's their endorsement.
I'm still going to cut you off. Wayne Douglas.
I get the last place, and I appreciate that because I've had that in another forum And I make the same pitch that I made then. I came in here saying, I'm the one who's advocating for Palo Alto citizens and one particular small slice of Palo Alto citizens, which doesn't seem to be the right strategy for winning a general election. But they are citizens of Palo Alto, just like the people in Buena Vista Park, the people who live in their cars, and did live in their cars, and took over, or what was it, the de facto homeless shelter that our wonderful city manager called it. They didn't take it over because they wanted to live there. That was the best choice they had, okay? And now we've managed to drive them out of town, or it appears to be that way.
I got to cut you off there. Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, we are ending on time. I want to thank all of our candidates for having answered all of those questions, tough questions as they were under tight timelines. I also thank you. Let me also thank all of you, members of the audience, and those watching on television. It is so important that a citizenry engage in both the public discourse, but especially in deciding who should lead the community. And so I thank you for being here tonight and for participating in the political process. And finally, a special thank you to PAN. If you are not engaged in your neighborhood association, get engaged today. They are active and have a great deal of influence in the conversation that happens in the future of Palo Alto. And so the final word will go to Sherry Furman from PAN. And again, thank you all for coming this evening.